Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and in this video, what I want to talk about is modals. Okay, basically, I learned about a new way you can create modals with some newer things in HTML. Okay, so now making a modal is easier than ever. So I'm gonna go over the new way first, so that way for those of you who are just here for like, hey, what's this new way of making modals? But for those of you who are also interested in learning how we used to make modals, I will do that as well. Okay, so this will be basically a modal masterclass. So first we're gonna do we'll just create like a new way.html and we'll show you the new way. Okay. So I'm gonna just set up my boilerplate. I'm gonna open this up in live server. So we'll get that going. Okay. And then I'm gonna open up this to the side, open up that to that side. There we go. And right now you can't really see anything because there's nothing going on yet. But essentially what happens now is you have this element called dialog. Okay, so you can create like a dialog box. Now you generally want to give it an ID if you want to do it in the most simplest way possible. So we'll say ID modal. Okay, the reason being is that technically whenever you give something an ID in HTML, it does automatically create a JavaScript variable to refer to that ID. That's the reason why IDs need to be unique, so that way it refers to a unique DOM node. So, here we'll say in this dialog box we'll have an h1, hello world. Okay, see right now you don't see it yet. Okay, what I'll do is I'll create a button, and this button will say open, and then we're gonna say, hey, on click, whenever this button is clicked, okay, we're gonna say modal.show modal is the function. Okay, so now when I click this, hello world. Okay, so you see there you go. How easy was that? How awesome was that? You have a modal. Okay, and then again, if you want to close it off, we'll add a button in here. A button close, and then we would say on click equals modal.close. So simple as that. And then I can just I can then also style this dialog box. So style it. Style. We'll say dialog. Okay, we're gonna say border 3 pixels solid green. Or actually, we'll say dotted green. Okay, yeah, let's just start with that. And if I click this now, see now I've changed the border of the modal. Okay, and then you can also change the background. So like that gray background, dialog, backdrop, I think it is. Okay, and then I think we just change like background color. We can change it to black. And now if I click this, okay, you get like that as a modal. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Okay, that makes making a modal much easier. Okay, we did that pretty quickly. Okay, there's some other niceties, like you can actually use a form to do the closing. So instead of using a button like I did here, I could also do something like this, form, and then I'll say like method equals dialog. So now it knows it's handling, and then we put like a little input here, type equals submit, and I'll be right back. Okay, and then basically what you can do is you can take that input and put in type submit, so that way it's a button. Okay, and then if we take a look here and we open, see now we have that submit button, and if I click that, it gets rid of the modal because that submission, that method is a dialog which allows it to treat, so you don't have to worry about like prevent default or any of that stuff. So that's all pretty cool. Okay, there's some other stuff where basically you can grab the data from the form that externally, and lots of other cool things you can do. But bottom line, that's pretty straightforward way to create a modal. So let's talk about the old way to do a modal. So let's create a new file and say the old way, which has no built-in functionality. You have to kind of create all that functionality yourself. Okay, so again, we'll do our HTML boilerplate, and basically what happens is we'll have a button. Okay, and we'll come back to that. You know, open. But essentially what would happen is that we would create just a random div, doesn't matter where you create it. You know, we'll give it the ID of modal. We'll say modal backdrop. And then inside of it we'll have like another div that's called ID modal content. Okay, and then basically what we would do here is we'd say, you know, here we'll have the h1 again, hello world. And see right now you see, well, let me first open this up in live server. Let's open that up and see, you see the hello world and you see the button. Essentially what we do is we're going to get the effect that we want through styling. So I'm going to put a style tag up here. Okay, and essentially what we do is we're going to style that modal backdrop. Okay, so basically model backdrop will be our first style. Okay, and essentially what we want to do is we want to create like a big like black backdrop. So basically we're going to say background color black. Okay, and let me refresh that. Okay, model backdrop. Did I spell something wrong? Modal. Oh, modal. There we go. Okay, so you see like that's all black now. Okay, and then what we want is the modal content to have a color that you can read the text on. So we'll say background color white. Okay, so now you can see like that, and then, but you don't see the black anymore, so we'll put some padding in here. Well, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to make this take up the full screen. So we're going to say width 100% of viewport width. So that's like 100% of the width of the screen. And then this is going to be the height 100% of the viewport height. Okay, and so you get this big black screen except for the hello world because the hello world background is white. And again, we want to make sure that it's not like necessarily touching the edges. Okay, so generally what we'll do here is we'll make the modal backdrop a flex box. So display flex, because that gives us those fun alignment possibilities. So we can now do this like to justify content. We can do that to center it, so that'll center it. And then we want to center it vertically as well, so it'll be align items, center. Okay, and so you kind of get that effect. Then we might, you know, give this padding like 10 pixels, so that way it looks a little bit nicer. Yep, so that looks a little bit nicer. And then we will, you know, give it a fixed height and width. So we'll say height 300 pixels, width 300 pixels. Okay, and there you kind of have a little bit more of a modal. And then again, maybe I want to center that H1. I can do more styling there, but you get the visual of a modal. But the thing is that I don't want this visible all the time, right? So basically what we do is we take this backdrop, again this parent div, so we want to make this div by default disappear. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen is that by default the display is going to be none. Okay, so that way that disappears. Okay, and what we're going to want is some JavaScript. So we'll put some script. Okay, and we're going to go grab the modal. So modal const modal. Well, actually, I don't even really need to do that. Right? I can just do this. I mean, the simplest thing I can do, because again, remember that when something has an ID, it automatically creates a variable for it. Okay, the problem is this ID wouldn't work as a variable, so that won't work. So maybe change it to this modal backdrop, modal content, and then we'll just change that to this and this to that. Let's see if that all works. Good. Okay. Because then what I can do is I can say on click equals Okay, modal backdrop dot style dot display equals flex. Okay, so because you can put JavaScript right there in your HTML like that. So let me just see here. Let me refresh that. So if I click open, oh, not doing the thing. Okay, let me just think about why. Modal backdrop dot style. Oh, I spelled display wrong. That would do it. So refresh. Then I click open. And see, that works. Okay. And then what I can do again here, I put a button that does the opposite. Okay. ID equals. And then again, I can just copy this here and change it back to none. Okay, well actually let's put some text in that button. Close. And then something about this isn't right. Modal backdrop, that display. Oh, this should be on click, not ID. On click. There we go. And that works. Okay, we have a modal. Wonderful. Okay, but you see I had to do all that styling, and you don't necessarily want to, in either situation, you don't necessarily want to make it an on-click. Because the idea is that having JavaScript in your HTML, and then you're separately doing JavaScript elsewhere, depending on the nature of your page. Like if it's a very simple page where you're not really doing much other JavaScript other than that, then inline JavaScript like that's just fine. But for heavy-duty pages where you're going to be doing a lot of JavaScript in separate files, you'd rather keep it there. So that way people aren't looking all around the place to figure out, hey, where is this code coming from and where's that code coming from? So in that case, I would probably rather do it like this. Okay. So what we'll do is we create a script tag. Okay. And then I can create a function. And then I would actually rather, actually create a variable explicitly, because then again, I could reference modal backdrop as a variable. Again, that variable becomes available in your JavaScript. But then again, someone reads your code, they're gonna be like, where did that variable get defined? Because not everybody necessarily knows that's the browser's behavior. And I think in strict mode, it turns that off if your JavaScript is running in strict mode. So, the safest thing to do is to create your own separate variable and be like document.querySelector. And then, target that item by ID, modal backdrop. Okay. And then I can create two functions to open and close. So I can be like const open equals a function that literally just does this. Okay, and then except this will be just modal. Okay, that's going to change that to flex. And then a function called open or close that just does the opposite. Changes it to none, so that way it's invisible again. And then again, I can target those two buttons. So I'd give those buttons some sort of like way of targeting it. So, without adding additional IDs and classes, what I could do is I could say const open button equals document.querySelector, and that's going to equal a body that is a direct child, or a button that is a direct child of the body. So that's what that would mean. So that should target that button. And then the close button we want to target the button that is a direct child of the modal content div. So I can say, okay, here this is going to be the ID of modal content, and then I want a button that is a direct child of that. Okay, and that should give me the right buttons. Let's just make sure. Console.log open button, close button. Okay, and then I open up my DevTools to see those console logs. Okay. Nope, it did not grab those buttons. So see, I got two nulls here. So I did not successfully grab the right button. Okay, so let's think about that. Oh, and that's because this JavaScript is before the DOM. I wonder if I can just defer this block. Nope, that doesn't quite work. So I need to just take this block and put it below the HTML for now, because I'm not doing this in a separate file. So that needs to run after. Okay, and that does work. Okay, so this does work. Good. And now what I can do is I can say, hey, open button dot add event listener when the button is clicked. Then all it's going to do is run the open function. Okay, and then for a close button, when it is, we'll run the close function. So in that case, I don't need these on clicks on the buttons anymore because it's in my JavaScript. Okay, so instead of having the JavaScript in my HTML, I am just doing it elsewhere. Okay, so now if I refresh the page, I click open, Modal opens, I close it, Modal closes. Because again, the buttons have the particular functions attached to them. So that's the old way of doing a modal. Okay, but there's no any additional functionality I'd have to add myself. So again, I had to do all the styling from scratch to kind of get that overlay effect myself. So it's taking, and then it's not, unless I have to use divs instead of using a special element for that. But yeah, you can easily create modals elsewhere this way. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the way I did that. Okay. Trying to think if there's anything else I'd like to mention about that. But no, that should do it. Again, the only other thing you might want to keep in mind is that let's say I have the modal at the top before everything else. So in that case, it's always going to appear at the top of the screen. But let's say I put the modal below the button. Okay, so let's say I do that. Control X, and I put it below this button. What's going to happen is that now, watch, see the button, and then there's the modal, and that kind of destroys that whole like full screen effect. Okay, so in that case, if you want to kind of address that, what you could do is you change its position. And basically what you do is it doesn't matter where it is in the HTML anymore. If the position is absolute, okay, it'll always be exactly where you put it. And then you would just say, hey, top 0, so it's 0 pixels from the top, and then 0 pixels from the left. Okay, and so now what happens, it still covers everything because now it's on top. It's like overlaying in that case. So that's the only other thing to keep in mind when you're styling the modal. That you may want to do that to make sure that it's, no matter where it is in your HTML, it's just overlaying everything, not relative to everything. So have a great day. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Like the video, leave a comment. I'll see you all later.